Kia ora everyone, and welcome to another look at all things cycling thanks to Sky Sport here in New Zealand. It's been a crazy week, crazy month of cycling at Woodford. With me, as always, we're going to start Tour of Flanders, an epic battle between Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert. Del, what did you make of that?
What a battle. Like, after the build-up from Gent-Wevelgem, where they blamed each other, well, Wout van Aert and, blamed van der Poel a lot more and was quite outspoken, and that could have had a real negative impact on this race, and they could have counted each other out again. But they raced, and they raced like the giants of the sport they are. And what a finish! Great, really, really fitting finale to my favourite classic of the year. I just love that race, and to see Mathieu van der Poel win it. A long time after his dad won in 1986, and it must have been a pretty proud moment for everybody in that family to see him step up. And I think even for the Belgian fans, even though he's the Dutch national champion, he lives in Belgium, he rides the Belgium cross season, he's really well known, he's really liked there as well. So I don't think even the Belgian fans will feel like they missed out, as much this time as maybe they did a week ago at Gent-Wevelgem.
Those two are just amazing, aren't they? We've seen in these races the rivalry already, despite the fact that they're both reasonably young, and it's going to keep going for years, isn't it, between these two, because they're just so good on these type of races.
They are, and they're quite they're not new to cycling, but what they've accomplished across such a wide range of the sport, if they're cross, they're road racing, they're riding tours, there's not really anything that they can't do. And probably the thing they haven't experienced a whole lot is a two-up bunch sprint like that. But then if you look back through their careers from juniors, these guys have raced each other as schoolboys, as juniors, as cyclocross racers. They know each other inside out. The sprint finish, like tactically, both guys were absolutely spent in my view. There was no petrol left in the tank. They did really well to ride tempo, to hold the break. It went from, about a minute so down to a few seconds at the end. They knew what they were doing. They shared the load a little bit. Then the last kilometre, Wout goes, I'm just going to sit on. And Mathieu van der Poel did everything right, stayed on that right-hand side of the road, kept a little, looked one way, a little bit of room. So he had, Van Aert's had to come round. And I thought Wout van Aert was going to open the sprint probably 75, 50 metres earlier than he did. And maybe he might have changed the result. But that just shows how cooked they both were. They both left it as late as possible, jumped at about the same time, matched each other right to the line. And I printed out the photo finish because there's just, like inches between them. And at the end of that distance, wow, what a result. And Alexander Kristoff as well. He's won the race before. Great ride again to take that third place. So I guess the winner's happy, the third place is happy, and the guy in second place is thinking, shit, what could have been?
And probably the only one not happy was Alaphilippe, as you mentioned. What do you put that one down to? I sort of watched it, and it didn't seem like the bike was at fault. It's not one of those ones where it tore out of nowhere and cut him off. It just maybe a loss of concentration, or he just wasn't quite looking. And that all it took was that split second.
Yeah. Well, we speak quite a bit, don't we, about rider safety and protecting the riders and the barriers and the organisers taking responsibility. We saw Jesse Sargent clanged out by a Shimano support vehicle in the very same race a number of years ago. This was totally different. The riders were doing everything right. The race officials were doing everything right as well. They were on the right-hand side of the road where they needed to be. They were parked up. They were hard out of the way. And the riders just come up around that corner, head down, really. But, everyone head down. The lead rider saw it at the last minute. Second rider corrects. Alaphilippe, he's a little bit smaller, a little bit more, tucked in and sheltered, and not expecting that. And unfortunately, he just clipped it. And clipping it at that speed, wow, he came down so hard, and you could hear him screaming on the road when they zoomed in. And I think a double fracture in his hand is the end result. So it was the last race of the season for him anyway. But sad way for the world champion to end. But I thought to that point he rode really well. As I said before, I don't think he would have matched them on the very last climb, big power climb. Those two guys are just at another level on that sort of climb. But hey, we'll never know now if that was going to be the case. But unfortunate for him, but he showed what he can do in the Flemish Classics. And that's really exciting for him and for his team going forward, because they're a true classics team, and he's going to be one that next year they'll really have to watch. He'll be top of the list. I think it's one of the favourites.
All of a sudden, the Vuelta of Espana is upon us. It starts Wednesday morning live on Sky Sport 9 throughout. Obviously, the big storyline, I guess, is the Giro d'Italia. We've seen that descend into a bit of chaos with Kruijswijk going home, teams pulling out due to COVID and the protocols. The key thing, I guess, to remember about the Vuelta is it's run by ASO, which is the same as the Tour de France. I guess you would probably expect that to be a bit of a better bubble, a bit better organised than the Giro has been.
I think so. I think the Giro is always a little bit loose. Some of the stories that have come out about hotels being shared with the police marshals and the general public, that's just not ideal at all. I guess to the organisers' credit, when that happened, the positive cases, the teams going home, a call from Jonathan Borders to cancel the race, lots of... They've really stepped up and they've tightened things around that. So, they can do it, but it took a big scare for that to happen. And you're absolutely right. ASO run a really tight ship. They proved that at the Tour de France. And unfortunately for them, Paris-Roubaix is not going ahead because of the shutdown. But I think what we saw at Flanders, people will stay home. They'll watch the bike race, which is good going forward because we don't know what 2021 is going to bring. And the Vuelta, I think, will be much the same. The Vuelta is... And as we'll see again on Sky Sport, it seems like you're in barren land, you're in the countryside till you get to the mountain finishes or a stage finish. So I think the riders will be really protected. They'll feel really safe. They'll still follow the COVID protocols and testing protocols, etc. But I don't think we'll have any cases during the Vuelta.
Yeah, I expect it to be a lot better controlled too. And I think it needs to be, the riders will feel like it needs to be to sort of prove that it can exist in the COVID world. It's an interesting field lined up. We'll focus in on Jumbo-Visma to start with George Bennett obviously racing there. They line up with Primož Roglic again, Tom Dumoulin as their leaders. You've got Sepp Kuss and Robert Hessink there. How are you expecting them and George to play this, considering they probably don't have the same depth of resources as they did at the Tour, and also that the race itself is quite different?
Yeah, the race is different. If we look at the course, we're used to seeing the last week of Grand Tours being the really hard week. We're late into the season now. We're late into October. The big mountain passes, they may have snow on them. So that's why the Vuelta, I think, has turned the race around a little bit. So that's going to change the dynamics of the race. But, as I've seen so many times on the Vuelta, Henry, there's a stage you think that's a fairly flat stage, and then you'll see someone getting shelled. And it's happened to George. It looks like a straightforward stage, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a climb, and then only the Spanish riders seem to know about, and they put the hammer down, and it blows apart. The first week will be quite different, I think, with Chris Froome making his comeback. Ineos will still have to do quite a bit of the work and almost control the race because of the status of Chris Froome. Jumbo-Visma with the riders you've mentioned, Dumoulin, Roglic, George. How they're backing up from the Tour de France is just absolutely incredible as well. I know they've had a big break from the World Championships, but 2 Grand Tours quite close together. I think they still go into the race as the favourites, to be honest. And there's a number of, George himself, we could, give the opportunity if could take the race. Sepp Kuss, the way he rode in the Tour de France, he looked like he was in sort of third gear most of the time, just cruising. We haven't seen him, I don't think, fully extend himself or go full gas on an attack. But of course, you've always got the Spanish Armada. Like, it's their race, and they always seem to come up with something on that race. Valverde, he seems to always deliver a near podium finishing spot in the Vuelta as well. So, yeah, this race, I think it's going to be really exciting to watch. Like you mentioned, the change of the course. Really interested to see how Chris Froome goes, how he's supported. And he also doing a great job at the Giro after losing Geraint Thomas. So I think they'll be motivated for a good performance as well. And I think, Primož Roglic will probably looking for not sort of a redemption from the Tour de France, but just a nice way to end the season with a Grand Tour win again.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Jumbo-Visma definitely going as favourites with Roglic and Dumoulin and that good supporting cast around them. I spoke to George the other night. He said he was feeling reasonably good. He'd sort of recovered a little bit after the Tour and Worlds, and It was said some quite interesting stuff around their tactics. Obviously, he said they didn't regret anything from the Tour de France, but they probably don't have the same level of control at the Vuelta, and maybe we might see him and the likes of Sepp Kuss given a bit more license to be a bit more aggressive and maybe push the race on a bit that way.
I think it's a really good thing. I think they probably learnt a little bit from the Tour de France. They absolutely dominated the race in just about every area of the race and just didn't get that final result. But I think sometimes their vice-like grip was too tight on the race, and they could have afforded to have some of their guys attack or, let some other teams do some work. So if they're taking that sort of approach into the Vuelta, they're going to be really dangerous. Like, they've got firepower, really like no other team right now in terms of really genuine GC contenders. The names you mentioned, Dumoulin, Roglic, Bennett, Kuss, and then you've got backing them up, the guys that are, right behind them, Robert Giesing. Look at, the guy himself could be a Grand Tour contender as well, and he has been in the past. He's there to support. So, I think we're going to see a different style of racing from Jumbo-Visma, but I think that'll be a really good thing, and I think they'll take a lot out of what they achieve in the Vuelta into next year's Tour de France as well.
And speaking of other Kiwis in the race, the guy I'm most excited to see, Dion Smith at Mitchelton Scott. There's a great Kiwi connection there with, of course, Julian Dean looking like he's the main sport director for them in Spain. Smith's been building really nicely. He's had some great results. He had that win at one of the Belgian races, and they've come out and said on the stages that suit him, they'll be riding in full support. I think he's definitely a decent chance to pick up a really good finish on one of those stages that suit him.
Yeah, he's an outstanding rider. He's brilliantly talented. The race he won in Italy is a fantastic race. Like, it's a hard race to win. It's an uphill finish. There's plenty of those in the Vuelta. He's good. He's a good bunch sprinter. He's been a KOM jersey wearer in the Tour de France. He's had a great season. He's looked really good. He looked fantastic at the World Championships. So you're right. He's built really nicely. He's got the support of a fantastic team. Wonderful director in Julian Dean. Julian's roles usually drives in front of the race and gives a lot of instruction back to the team. So having him in the car right behind the race, I think, will add a really good element for Dion. He's got a good bunch kick on him. He can get over some punchy climbs, and I'll be really excited to see him add to our tally of stages wins in the Vuelta of Espana, because it's one of the few races New Zealanders have won stages in the past. So I'm looking forward to his name being added to that illustrious list.
Yeah, fingers crossed that's the case. And another couple of Kiwis we thought might be involved, but Paddy Bevan was down to ride for CCC. He seems to have missed the cut there, so again, not 100% sure what's going on. And Shane Archbold, apparently, from what I've heard, isn't feeling the best, so I think he's in doubt, which would be a shame because he'd be a pretty key man for Sam Bennett on the flat stages.
Yeah, absolutely. He'd be a big loss again to Sam Bennett, and I think after Bennett's success at the Tour de France without Shane would have really wanted to be a part of that, and they're such great mates. He would have even been given some opportunities. If Sam wasn't on his, feeling really good on a day, the role would be reversed. If he's not feeling too well, even if he's just got a cold, they won't be able to take him. The team just won't be able to afford to. So let's just hope he gets a clean bill of health. I guess by, if it starts Wednesday, he'll need it tonight. Probably clean bill of health tonight. And let's hope he gets to the start line. And Paddy Bevan, I just don't know what's going on there with his team, because he was supposed to be at the Giro, and then they pulled him from that. You spoke to him pre-Worlds, and he was a little bit despondent and disappointed not getting that start because 3 time trials in the race. Really thought they would have put him into the Vuelta, because he's had, I think by his standards, quite a light season, and just don't know what's broken down between him and the team. But on the plus side for Paddy, he's had a great year. He's been able to learn a lot. He's been able to prepare for some races how he wouldn't have normally prepared, and he's going into a great team with Israel Cycling Academy next year. That deal's done and dusted, so he'll be feeling, I think, pretty good about 2021. And again, joining Greg Henderson as a part of the management of that team. So I think he'll get a lot more opportunity next year, and let's hope so, because he's too good to be sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah, I agree. It's been quite puzzling, really, to see all that play out. So next year hopefully will be the year he sort of gets that full racing calendar. And just finally on the Vuelta, you mentioned him before, but two guys of big interest, I reckon, Chris Froome and Thibaut Pinot. What are you expecting from both of them? They're always active, and yeah, who knows how they'll both back up.
Yeah, well, Thibaut Pinot, I just don't know. He promises a lot as a GC rider, but I think we might see him go for some stages, and particularly in the first part of the Tour. He'll be over his injury from the Tour de France. He'll be pretty fresh. He'll be rearing to get something out of the season, if you like. So I think expect to see him really dancing on the pedals in the first week. Chris Froome, that's the big unknown. You know, how's he recovered? He hasn't had a lot of racing. I think, you know, in Torino he didn't look good. But it's Chris Froome. You know, you don't win that many Tour de France's, and you don't rock up to start the Vuelta when it's been one of your main goals out of form. So he'll get no rope given to him at all by his competitors. They know how dangerous he is. But for us fans, it's really, well, is Chris Froome at the level we know he can be? Have Israel made a good investment in Chris Froome? This race will tell us quite a bit, I think.
It's going to be fascinating to see how he pulls through. And yeah, we just don't know. This is the first test, and the thing is, with the way the race is, he's got to be good for the first week basically. Otherwise, you know, he's out of it. There's no time to build into it.
That's right. Yeah, no time at all. It's hit the ground running straight into the mountains.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. Can't wait for that race to start up. Unfortunately, there was some disappointing news this week around the team. Niamh Fisher-Black and Mikayla Harvey are involved in Equipe Paule Ka. They folded after the sponsors really just disappeared despite their promises earlier in the season. A real shame considering how well those two have gone and what they were building, and some of the results they got this year too.
Yeah, devastating for women's cycling. It just gets the blunt end of everything. I think we talk about the UCI stepping up for rider safety and protecting riders. I really wish they'd step up and support women's cycling. The racing we've seen over the last few years from the women's peloton has been fantastic racing, really aggressive, really exciting. The monuments are putting on the races to support them. The organisers have got behind it. All the teams are struggling for funds really at the women's level compared to what we're seeing at even second tier in the men's racing. So something's got to be done, Henry, to help grow and develop women's cycling across the globe. And totally devastating. I think two of the biggest talents we've seen for a long time performing on the roads of Europe. Niamh Fisher-Black, she will get picked up. Like, everyone's talking about her as a superstar, and it's early days in her career, and this is a little bit of a setback. But boy, she'll find a team, I'm sure, and I think Mikayla will as well. She put in a great ride in the Giro Rosa and winning the young riders competition, and as we said, Liège-Bastogne-Liège in the long list of favourites. So that's a good thing. But what worries me is there's not going to be enough teams. And we've got really talented riders, and I really hope, I don't know how you do it, but the UCI needs to figure it out and do something good for a change to grow women's cycling. It's exciting. It's great to watch. The fans love it. They've got the distances right. The races are aggressive from the start, and I just hope that our girls get a team to ride for. But I just hope that the sport supports the races and the race organisers to grow women's cycling.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. There's a lot of stuff that seems to be wrong with that process and the way it's treated. I tend to agree with you. I think obviously there's not a lot of teams, and contract situations at this time of the year are always quite niggly, but I'd be quite surprised if either of them aren't picked up, just considering how well they've gone this year and the impression they've made. You'd think that some teams surely would be able to find a spot for them.
Well, I would like to think they can find a sponsor for the whole team, because the team as a whole has performed really well. Like, they got that sponsorship, and they went out and paid it back straight away with some fantastic results. And it's not a massive investment for the coverage they get. I think the sponsorship was around €800,000 to run that team for a year. They're paying the top men a lot more than that one rider on a team. So and they're getting great TV time. the races are good. The fans are there watching the race. It's a great investment. So I'm just hoping that someone will come in, someone will see the opportunity with this young team to go, this is a team we've got for, if we look after it, we've got riders for the next 5 years that are going to take us from the level we're at to the top of the sport. So I'm really hoping, Henry, that yes, if nothing happens, that Mikayla and Niamh will get a team to ride for, but I really hope someone comes in and gets behind this team, because they've done a really good job in a difficult season.
Absolutely. I mean, they've done everything that was asked of them and more with the results. They're consistently at the front of the race. They're making things happen. It's not like they're anonymous. So yeah, fingers crossed someone can come in and save them and give them a hand. Moving on, just finally, we'll touch on the Giro too, because that's still going on, and amongst everything else, 15 stages done. João Almeida has still got a lead, but it's down to 15 seconds now. Seems like his time might be up with a few hard mountain stages to go. It looks like a few guys are coming for him.
They're going all right. He'll be praying for snow, I think, but he's going okay, as well. And I think for him, it'll be about the experience and knowing when you're going to blow up, just to button off a little bit, limit your loss, because you have one bad day. If you can limit that, everyone else might have a bad day the next day. You look at the mountains to come, time trial finish. So it's certainly not totally over for him, but you would have to think, Nibali's going to go on a long range attack at some stage. He goes downhill like a maniac. He's sort of flying the flag for the older riders in the race. The rest of them are all young still. So with this only a few days to go into the last stages of the Giro, at this point of the race, typical Giro, you don't always know who's going to win. And really exciting as a fan to tune into Sky Sport and just watch the action, because it's going to be dynamic over the next few days. I think Pozovito's looking pretty good. He can climb really well. Wilco's there as well. So I think he's probably in the box seat for the best time trial. But again, the Italians, it's their race, and they're more than known to form alliances, if you like. So don't write Nibali off yet.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Kelderman is looking like he's looking pretty good at the 15 seconds back in second. So my money is probably on him. Thanks very much for your time as always, mate. There's been so much to discuss, and I'm sure we'll have to reconvene next week and recap the Giro and see how George and Dion and the rest of the race is going at the Vuelta. So thanks for your time, and we'll catch up soon.
Pleasure, Henry. Thank you.